Elijah's fingers danced over the worn brass keys with an unusual urgency, his eyes constantly scanning the deserted street, where the pale yellow auras of the streetlights barely illuminated the damp patches on the sidewalk and the silent, dark silhouettes of closed doorways. A sense of unease crept into every breath, into every note struggling to escape his chest. At the end of the street, a dark figure detached itself from the moss-covered brick wall, slowly coming into focus. Dark blue uniform, and a cold half-smirk flickered beneath the brim of a police cap that obscured nearly half his face. Officer Mark Callahan. Elijah swallowed hard. His breath hitched, the unfinished melody suddenly faltering, then dying altogether. The saxophone in his hands, his companion through thick and thin, suddenly felt heavy. Silence. A terrifying silence, broken only by the wind whistling through the narrow alleys, carrying the chill of an unavoidable confrontation. Callahan said nothing, just slowly advanced, each of his footsteps like a hammer blow against Elijah's chest. It was a Tuesday evening, the first chill of the season beginning to seep into the skin. This street corner, where Elijah usually poured his soul into jazz melodies, suddenly felt alien and menacing. He was used to curious glances, a few spare coins tossed into his old hat, even the occasional complaint from a couple of cranky residents. But Callahan's gaze tonight was different. It didn't hold mere annoyance. It was contempt, an imposition of power, a warning without words. "Cut out that racket right now." Callahan's voice was a low, gravelly rumble, shattering the taut silence. He stood imposing before Elijah, his large shadow nearly engulfing the small musician. Elijah took a deep breath, trying to keep his voice from trembling. "Officer, I'm almost done, just a little longer." He only hoped to finish his set peacefully, pack up his saxophone, and disappear into the night. "I said, cut it out now," Callahan growled, taking another step, invading Elijah's personal space. "Or do you want me to help you cut it out?" He reached for the baton hanging at his hip, a threatening gesture. Cold sweat began to bead on Elijah's forehead. He knew he couldn't argue. People like Callahan never wanted to hear reason. They only wanted submission. "Yes, officer, I'll pack up right away." He began to carefully set the saxophone down, his fingers trembling. But Elijah's submission seemed to amuse Callahan even more. He looked at the brass saxophone, tarnished with age, with a scrutinizing gaze. "You call this piece of junk an instrument? Looks like a pile of scrap metal." The words felt like a knife to Elijah's heart. This saxophone wasn't just an instrument, it was his father's legacy, a talented but short-lived jazz musician. It was his soul, the vessel for all his unspoken emotions. He bowed his head, trying to hide the resentment welling up in his chest. "You got a permit to perform?" Callahan continued to press, though they both tacitly understood that on this street corner, for street musicians like Elijah, a permit wasn't mandatory. I didn't think I needed one," Elijah stammered. "Oh, you think?" Callahan sneered. "Around here, I'm the one who does the thinking, and I think vagrants like you, making a racket all over the neighborhood, need to be taught a lesson." With that, without further warning, Callahan's large hand shot out, grabbing the neck of the saxophone. Elijah froze, instinctively trying to hold on, but his strength was no match for the burly officer. A sharp tug. "No!" Elijah's desperate cry was drowned out by a harsh, jarring sound. The saxophone, his confidant, his pride, his reason for living, was ripped from his grasp. Elijah only had time to see it fly through the air before it slammed against the side of a metal trash can at the edge of the sidewalk. Clang! The sound rang out, sharp, like something shattering. Then everything fell silent. The saxophone lay sprawled on the cold cement, its already worn brass body now marred with grotesque dents. A few valves were bent, knocked out of place. Its final melody was a wail of anguish, of despair. Elijah was stunned. He sank to his knees beside his murdered friend. His eyes were wide, staring blankly at the wounds on the horn, his heart feeling as if someone had squeezed it tight. No tears, just a silent pain, an infinite emptiness. The world around him seemed to stop. Callahan stood there, watching the scene before him with a sick, satisfied look. He smirked, uttered one last remark before turning on his heel. "That's to make you remember. Next time, watch yourself." His figure disappeared into the night, leaving Elijah alone with the wreckage and a broken heart. The wind still blew, carrying the chill and the musty smell of the city at night. But for Elijah, all sound seemed to have died, leaving only the silent scream within his soul. His melody had truly been stolen, brutally silenced. And tonight, on a street corner in New Orleans, a part of the street musician's soul had died with his saxophone. The New Orleans night swallowed Elijah whole. He sat motionless on the cold sidewalk, the dented saxophone lying beside him like a silent testament to the brutality that had just unfolded. Officer Callahan's footsteps had long faded, but the aftershock of the incident still hung heavy in the air, as thick as the early morning fog along the Mississippi. Elijah's trembling hand reached out to touch the dents on the horn. The metal was cold, lifeless. Once an extension of himself, it was now just a misshapen, silent piece of metal. The pain wasn't just about the material value, though repairing or replacing it was nearly unthinkable for a street musician like him. The greater pain lay in the spiritual loss. This saxophone was the bridge to his late father, the vessel for melodies that words couldn't express. Callahan hadn't just damaged an instrument. He had torn apart a piece of memory, a piece of Elijah's soul. He tried to lift the saxophone, but it felt unusually heavy. Not its physical weight, but the weight of helplessness, of humiliation. What had he done wrong? Played music on a street corner? Brought a little joy to passers-by? Or was it simply because he was who he was, a black man with an old saxophone, who, in the eyes of people like Callahan, automatically became a suspicious, punishable individual? The questions swirled in Elijah's mind, unanswered. He was used to scrutinizing glances, the occasional rude remark. But this was the first time things had gone this far. The aggression, the unmasked violence, and worst of all, the feeling of isolation. No one had witnessed it. No one had intervened. Just him and his pain, in the heart of a city famed for its music and freedom. Finally, Elijah managed to get to his feet. He carefully cradled the injured saxophone, like holding a dying child. Each step back to his small tram apartment felt as heavy as lead. The streetlights cast his stooped shadow against the old walls. A lonely, broken figure. Elijah's room was simple, just enough space for a bed, a small table, and a few personal belongings. He placed the saxophone on the bed, gently, as if afraid of causing it more pain. Then he sat down on the rickety wooden chair, staring at it. Silence. Only his own ragged breathing and the steady tick-tock of an old clock on the wall, as if counting down the seconds of his despair. For the next few days, Elijah didn't leave his room. He didn't eat, didn't sleep. He just sat there, looking at the saxophone. The music within him had died. The only melody left was the silent sob in his chest. He remembered the days when his father was alive, the two of them playing music together, afternoons filled with the sound of horns and laughter. His father used to say, "Music is the medicine that heals all wounds, son. Don't ever let anyone steal your melody." But now, his melody had been brutally stolen. And this wound, was there any medicine that could heal it? One afternoon, as hunger pangs assailed him, Elijah wandered outside looking for something to eat. He passed his usual street corner. It was empty now, silent. No sound of his saxophone, only the roar of traffic and the hurried footsteps of passers-by. A few acquaintances who often stopped to listen to him play looked at him with a mixture of pity and curiosity. But no one dared to ask. An invisible fear seemed to have enveloped the entire neighborhood. He stopped in front of an old record store where he often bought vintage jazz albums. The owner, an elderly white man with silver hair and a kind smile, saw Elijah and came out. "Hey, Elijah. Haven't seen you playing for a few days. People miss your horn," he said, his voice full of warmth. Elijah just nodded slightly, forcing a weak smile. He didn't want to retell his shameful story, but the shop owner seemed to have heard something. He lowered his voice. "I heard. Something bad happened to your horn, didn't it? With a cop?" Elijah looked up, surprised. He didn't think anyone knew about his troubles. A flower vendor nearby told me, the owner explained. She saw part of it. She was very upset, but also scared. He sighed. It's not fair, Elijah. Your music brings joy to so many people. The shop owner's sincere words were like a warm current seeping into Elijah's frozen heart. For the first time in days, he felt a little warmth, a glimmer of hope. Maybe he wasn't completely alone. Maybe there were still people who cared, people who saw the injustice. Thank you, sir, Elijah said softly, his voice a little hoarse. My horn, it's badly damaged. I'm so sorry, the owner said, his eyes full of sympathy. If you need any help, don't hesitate to tell me. I might not be able to do much, but at least you know someone's listening. Elijah nodded again. He didn't know what else to say, but those words, simple as they were, had planted a tiny seed in his heart, a seed of hope, that maybe, just maybe, his melody hadn't completely died, that maybe, amidst the shattered sounds, there was still a chance for notes of love and justice to be heard. He left the store, his heart still heavy, but no longer completely desperate. The afternoon shadows lengthened on the New Orleans streets. Somewhere in the distance, a faint blues melody drifted by. The city was still alive, still breathing, still carrying its sorrows and joys. And maybe Elijah too needed to keep living, keep breathing, and find his melody again. Maya Brooks was a small whirlwind in the usual quiet of the Crescent City Beacon's newsroom, an online local paper trying to make a name for itself with hard-hitting pieces on New Orleans' less-seen issues. Having moved from Chicago a few months prior, Maya's curly hair seemed to have a life of its own, much like her, energetic, driven, and always hungry for the truth. She carried the idealism of a young journalist. To use her pen to make a difference, however small. That afternoon, Maya was wrestling with a piece on the lack of affordable housing when she overheard two colleagues talking. They were discussing some poor street musician in the French Quarter whose horn had supposedly been handled and damaged by a cop. The details were vague, but enough to pique Maya's curiosity. She'd heard too many stories of police misconduct in big cities, and her gut told her this might be more than an isolated incident. Anyone have more on that? Maya interjected, her voice full of interest. One colleague shrugged. Just hearsay. From a friend who works at a coffee shop nearby. Nothing solid. But for Maya, nothing solid was an invitation. She thanked her colleague and quickly looked up the mentioned coffee shop. She needed something more concrete, a starting point. The small coffee shop was tucked away on a cobblestone street, its atmosphere cozy and fragrant with roasted beans. Maya ordered a latte and struck up a conversation with the young barista. After a few tactful questions, the barista hesitantly recounted what she'd heard from a flower vendor who frequented the shop. She said the musician's name is Elijah. Plays saxophone on that corner over there. She's seen him looking down these past few days and heard his horn got messed up by a cop. Real shame. His music is beautiful. Elijah. The corner. A saxophone. Maya had her first pieces. She thanked the barista and quickly headed towards the indicated street corner. It was unusually quiet. No music, just the wind and the footsteps of tourists. Maya stood there for a moment, trying to picture the scene before this silence had fallen. She needed to find Elijah. It took a few days of asking around before Maya found Elijah's address, an old rooming house in the Trem. She knocked, a little nervous. The door creaked open, and a black man with tired, sunken eyes looked out. It was Elijah. He looked much more worn down than Maya had imagined. Mr. Vance, Maya began, trying to keep her voice gentle and respectful. I'm Maya Brooks, a reporter with the Crescent City Beacon. Could I talk to you for a moment? Elijah looked at her warily. A reporter? I have nothing to say to reporters. He started to close the door. Wait, please, Maya said quickly, putting her hand out to stop the door. I heard about what happened to your saxophone. With that officer, I just want to understand the truth. Maybe I can help. House. Us. Elijah's eyes flickered with surprise, then quickly shifted to suspicion. "Help me. What can you do?" "It's done. My horn is broken. Nobody cares." His voice was laced with bitterness and despair. "I care," Maya said firmly, looking directly into Elijah's eyes. "And I believe other people will care too, if they know the truth. Silence won't get your horn back, and it won't stop similar things from happening to others." Elijah was silent, looking at Maya. He saw the sincerity and determination in the young woman's eyes. It had been a long time since anyone had looked at him with genuine concern, not pity or curiosity. "Come in," he finally said, his voice still hesitant, and opened the door wider. The room was small, dim, and somewhat cluttered. The damaged saxophone lay in state on the single bed, like a relic. Maya felt her heart ache at the sight of the dents. She could feel this musician's pain. They sat opposite each other, the silence and the broken saxophone between them. Maya waited patiently. She knew she couldn't rush him. Finally, Elijah began to speak. At first, his voice was hesitant, broken, as if he were trying to dredge up painful memories. He recounted the fateful evening, Officer Callahan, the brutal actions, and the insulting words. He spoke of the saxophone's meaning to him, of his late father. As he spoke, his voice grew stronger, the pent-up anguish finding release. Maya listened intently, never interrupting, occasionally just nodding slightly to show empathy. She took careful notes, trying to capture every nuance of emotion in Elijah's account. She felt the profound injustice he had suffered, and anger began to rise within her. This wasn't just a story about a broken horn. This was a story about abuse of power, about human dignity being trampled. When Elijah finished, silence filled the room again. But this time it wasn't as heavy or desperate. It held an understanding, a connection just formed between two strangers. "Thank you for sharing, Mr. Vance," Maya said, her voice sincere. "I know this wasn't easy. I promise you, I'll do everything I can to bring this story to light. You're not alone in this." Elijah looked at Maya, a faint but clear glimmer of hope in his tired eyes. Maybe this young woman could actually help him. Maybe the call from his silence had finally been heard. "That officer," Elijah said, his voice softer. "His name is Mark Callahan. I glanced at his name tag." Maya nodded, writing down the name. Mark Callahan. That would be the next starting point in her quest for justice. And Elijah's. The name Mark Callahan became an obsession for Maya Brooks. She spent the following days digging into every piece of information she could find on the officer. The New Orleans Police Department's NOPD public records didn't offer much of note. A few years of service, a couple of commendations for minor arrests. No official record of disciplinary actions or complaints. On the surface, Callahan was a model officer. But Maya knew that surfaces often concealed more complex truths. She returned to the French Quarter, frequenting bars and shops, talking to people who worked there, other street musicians. Initially, most people were hesitant, fearful of talking about the police, especially Callahan. "That guy's bad news," an older guitarist whispered to Maya after she promised not to use his name. "Always acting high and mighty, likes to bully the little guy. A lot of folks around here can't stand him, but who's going to do anything?" Maya gathered many fragmented accounts, unofficial complaints about Callahan's arrogant attitude, his unprovoked harassment. Nothing substantial enough for legal evidence. But they painted a consistent picture of a petty abuser of power, a bully in uniform. She took meticulous notes, each story strengthening her resolve. The biggest challenge was finding direct evidence for Elijah's incident. He had said no one witnessed Callahan damaging the horn. Maya scoured the area around the street corner where it happened, looking for security cameras. Luck was on her side. A small souvenir shop opposite the corner had a camera pointed towards the street. The shop owner, a middle-aged woman named Mrs. Dubois, was initially uncooperative. "I don't want any trouble with the police," she said, her voice anxious. "Please, Miss Reporter. Nothing good comes from messing with them," Maya persisted. She explained she only wanted the truth, that this could help prevent similar incidents in the future. She spoke of Elijah, his pain, the meaning of his saxophone. Finally, Maya's sincerity, and perhaps a twinge of conscience, softened Mrs. Dubois. "All right," she said, "but you have to promise. No one will know I gave you this footage." Maya promised. The video from Mrs. Dubois' camera wasn't perfect. It was shot from a distance, a bit blurry, and the angle wasn't direct. However, it captured the moment Callahan struggled with Elijah over the saxophone and then threw it towards the trash can. Callahan's face wasn't crystal clear, but his build, uniform, and actions were unmistakable. It was a significant breakthrough. With Elijah's testimony and the video in hand, Maya knew she needed legal advice. She remembered a name an old colleague had mentioned: Samuel "Sam" Green, a veteran civil rights attorney in New Orleans, known for defending the marginalized and confronting systemic injustice. Mr. Sam Green's office was in an old, unglamorous building that nonetheless exuded a sense of dignity. Mr. Sam, a black man with silvering hair and sharp, intelligent eyes, listened intently as Maya presented Elijah's story. He watched the video repeatedly on Maya's old laptop, his face betraying little emotion. When Maya finished, Mr. Sam leaned back in his chair and sighed. "Another one," he said, his voice tinged with weariness. "Child, I've heard stories like this more times than I can count. Police abuse, innocent people suffering. This system is rotten to the core." Maya felt a little discouraged by his pessimism. "So, you don't think we can do anything?" "Mr." Sam looked at her, a spark igniting in his tired eyes. "I didn't say we can't do anything. I just said it's difficult. Very difficult. This video," he pointed to the screen, "it's helpful, but it's not a slam dunk. The face isn't clear. The actions could be interpreted in different ways. The police department will do everything they can to protect their own. But we have Elijah's testimony," Maya countered, "and the other unofficial complaints about Callahan. The word of a black street musician against a white police officer. Mr." Sam raised an eyebrow. "You know which way the scales of justice usually tip, and unofficial complaints have no legal standing." Still, Maya didn't give up. "So what do we need to do, Mr. Green? I believe this story needs to be told, needs to be fought for. Elijah deserves justice." Mr. Sam looked at the young woman before him, saw the unyielding passion and determination in her eyes. It reminded him of himself many years ago when he first started as a lawyer, also carrying that same fire of idealism. A fire that years of facing harsh realities had weakened, but never extinguished. "All right," he said, a rare smile playing on his lips. "I like your persistence, Miss Brooks. We'll give it a shot. First thing is to gather more evidence if possible, find more witnesses, even indirect ones, and prepare for a long fight. The police department won't admit fault easily." He gave Maya a list of things to do, leads to explore. He also agreed to represent Elijah legally if the case progressed further. Leaving Mr. Sam's office, Maya felt a renewed sense of energy. The road ahead was still full of obstacles, but at least now she had an ally, an experienced mentor, and most importantly, she had faith that the truth, no matter how well hidden, would eventually find its way to the light. She called Elijah, telling him about the meeting with Mr. Sam and the initial progress. Elijah listened silently, then said softly, "Thank you, Maya. Thank you for not giving up." In his voice, Maya heard sincere gratitude and a hope, however fragile, slowly rekindling. The journey to reclaim the stolen melody had just begun, but at least they were no longer walking alone in the dark. With Mr. Sam Green's guidance and the information she'd gathered, Maya Brooks threw herself into writing the article. She wanted her words not just to report the facts, but to touch the reader's emotions, to make them feel Elijah's pain and the injustice he had suffered. She recounted the fateful evening in detail, describing the saxophone as a friend, a part of the musician's soul. She quoted Elijah's bitter testimony, contrasting it with Officer Callahan's indifferent, abusive demeanor. The blurry but haunting video footage was also mentioned, accompanied by a call for anyone with more information to come forward. The article, headlined, "What Tune for Justice? A Street Musician and a Confrontation with Power," was published on the Crescent City Beacon's homepage on a Monday morning. The editorial board had initially hesitated, worried about potential backlash from the police department. But Maya's persistence and the tacit support of a few senior editors, who were also tired of similar stories being swept under the rug, helped the article see the light of day. The initial reaction was slow, then quickly spread like a small fire fanned by the wind. On New Orleans online forums, in community groups on social media, Maya's article began to be shared. The hashtag number NOLA Stolen Sounds, which she had suggested at the end of the piece, started appearing more and more. Most comments expressed outrage and sympathy for Elijah. "Unbelievable. In the city of music, a musician is treated like this," one person wrote. "Officer Callahan needs to be seriously investigated. This is a clear abuse of power," another commented. Many shared that they had heard Elijah play and loved his melodies. However, there were also dissenting opinions. Comments defending the police, suggesting there must have been a reason, or the reporter just wants to stir up trouble. A few comments even carried a tacit undertone of derision, targeting Elijah for being a black street musician. Maya read them all, trying to remain calm. She knew this fight wouldn't be easy. Elijah, after Maya informed him the article was published, felt a complex mix of anxiety and a fragile hope. He feared the attention, the trouble it might bring, but a part of him also felt relieved, as if a long-suppressed burden had finally been shared. He read the article over and over, seeing his story told with respect and empathy. More importantly, Maya's article had struck a chord with another segment of the community: the street musicians. They understood best the precarity, the hardships, and the prejudices they faced daily. Elijah's story was a wake-up call, a deep expression of empathy. A few days after the article was published, a group of young musicians who often played in the French Quarter contacted Maya. They expressed their support for Elijah and wanted to do something tangible. "We can't let this just slide," the group's leader, a drummer named Leo, told Maya over the phone. "Elijah is one of us. Today it's him, tomorrow it could be any of us." Leo proposed organizing a small concert right on the street corner where Elijah usually played. The initial purpose was simple: to raise money to help Elijah repair or buy a new saxophone, and more importantly, to show the solidarity of the street musician community. They wanted to send a message that they would not be silent in the face of injustice. Maya thought the idea was brilliant. It would not only help Elijah materially, but could also create a stronger wave of public opinion, attracting more attention from the public and potentially larger media outlets. She immediately called Mr. Sam Green for his opinion. Mr. Sam, after hearing the plan, was somewhat reserved. "A concert, huh? All right," he said. "But be careful. Don't let it turn into a riot. The police will use that as an excuse to crack down." He advised Maya and the musicians to notify local authorities about the event beforehand, ensuring everything proceeded peacefully and orderly. Elijah, when Maya and Leo visited him to tell him about the concert idea, initially refused. I don't think I can do it," he said, his voice hesitant. "I don't want to cause any more trouble for everyone. And I don't have a horn to play anymore." "You don't have to play, Elijah," Leo said, placing a friendly hand on his shoulder. "Just be there, let people see you, see that you're not alone. We'll play music for you. And the money we raise will help you get your horn back." Maya also gently persuaded him. "This is your chance to have your voice heard, Elijah, not just through my article, but through your presence, through the community support. Don't let fear overshadow that." After a moment of silent contemplation, Elijah finally nodded. A faint but clear determination appeared in his eyes. Perhaps this was the time he had to face it, not just for himself, but for others. for other melodies that were also in danger of being silenced. Plans for the music for Aaliyah, a Harmony of Hearts concert, quickly got underway. Information spread through social media, through word of mouth among artists. A small makeshift stage would be set up. Instruments would be brought, and hopefully, compassionate hearts would also find their way there. It would be the first note of resistance, a symphony of humanity and a yearning for justice, starting from a small street corner in New Orleans, where a once-stolen melody was being given a chance to be reborn. On Saturday afternoon, the street corner where Aaliyah had once poured his soul into familiar jazz melodies was unusually bustling. A small stage made of wooden pallets had been hastily erected, a simple banner stretched above it reading, "Music for Aaliyah, a Harmony of Hearts." Speakers and amplifiers, brought by volunteer musicians, sat on the sidewalk, wires snaking across the pavement. There were no dazzling stage lights, no professional setup, just sincerity and a special atmosphere, a mixture of indignation, hope, and a love for music. News of the concert had spread faster than expected. It wasn't just street musicians and Aaliyah's friends. Many New Orleans residents, of all ages and backgrounds, who had read Maya's article or heard his story, also came. They carried small, handmade signs with messages like "Justice for Aaliyah," "NOLA Music Matters," or simply a drawing of a saxophone. The small street corner had suddenly become a rendezvous point for empathy. Aaliyah arrived with Maya and Mr. Sam Green. He still wore his usual simple clothes, his face a little tense but no longer expressing the despair of previous days. He was surprised to see the crowd. He hadn't thought so many people would care about the story of an unknown street musician like himself. A warm, indescribable feeling spread through his chest. Leo, the young drummer who had initiated the concert, stepped onto the makeshift stage and took the microphone. "Welcome, everyone," he said, his voice exuberant. "We're here today not just to enjoy music. We're here for Aaliyah. We're here to say that we will not be silent in the face of injustice. We're here to say that the music of New Orleans, the soul of this city, will never be extinguished." Applause and cheers erupted. The concert began. Familiar New Orleans jazz, blues, and funk tunes filled the air, powerful and emotional. Musicians took turns performing, each offering words of encouragement and support for Aaliyah. The atmosphere grew more and more lively. People danced to the music, sang along to familiar songs. The initial sadness and anger seemed to be soothed by the music, transformed into a positive energy, a strong sense of unity. Maya stood in the crowd, watching everything with a satisfied smile. This was the power of community, the power of the truth being spoken. She looked over at Aaliyah, saw him silently watching the performance, his eyes slightly teary. Midway through the concert, Leo returned to the microphone. "And now," he said, his voice more solemn, "we'd like to invite to the stage the man for whom we are all here today. Please give a huge round of applause for Aaliyah Vance." All eyes turned to Aaliyah. The applause was deafening. Aaliyah was a little startled. He hadn't expected to go on stage. He looked at Maya and Mr. Sam with a pleading look. "Go on, Aaliyah," Maya said softly, taking his hand. "This is your chance. People want to hear you." Mr. Sam also nodded encouragingly. "They're here for you, son." After a moment's hesitation, Aaliyah took a deep breath and slowly walked towards the stage. The crowd gradually quieted, waiting. When he stood before the microphone, his heart pounded. He had never spoken in front of so many people before. He looked down at the unfamiliar but friendly faces below. I don't know what to say," Aaliyah began, his voice trembling slightly. I really didn't think so many people would care about someone like me." He paused for a moment, trying to compose himself. "That saxophone. It wasn't just an instrument to me. It was a part of me. It was a memory of my father. When it was broken, I felt like a part of me had died too." His voice choked. The crowd remained silent, listening. "I thought no one would understand. No one would care." Aaliyah continued, his voice a little steadier. "I thought I was all alone, Seeing all of you here today, I don't know how to thank you enough." He looked down at his hands, his fingers calloused from years of playing the saxophone. "They can take my horn," he said, lifting his head, a new determination shining in his eyes. "They can try to silence my melody, but they can't take away the love of music in my heart. And they can't take away the support, the affection that all of you have shown me today. I don't have a horn to play for you tonight," he said, a sad smile flickering across his lips. "But I promise I will be back. I will find my melody again. For my father, for myself, and for all of you." When Elijah finished, a hush fell for a moment. Then applause erupted like thunder. This time it wasn't just applause for music, but applause for courage, for the resilience of an ordinary man who dared to stand up after being knocked down. Many in the crowd couldn't hold back their tears. Maya felt a lump in her throat. She was proud of Elijah. He had found his voice again, a voice more powerful than any melody he had ever played. Leo stepped forward and hugged Elijah tightly. "We're always with you, brother." The concert continued, but the atmosphere had changed. It was no longer just a musical event. It had become a powerful affirmation of humanity, of the strength of unity in the face of injustice. The money collected in the box placed in front of the stage grew steadily, but more important than the money was the affection, the sharing that the community had shown Elijah. That evening, when the concert ended and the crowd gradually dispersed, Elijah stood alone on the familiar street corner, now returned to its usual tranquility. He took a deep breath of the fresh evening air. The pain was still there, but it no longer consumed him. Instead, a new hope, a new strength, was rising powerfully within him. His melody had never truly been stolen. It had only temporarily subsided, and today, resonated by hundreds of hearts, it had begun to sound again, stronger, more resilient. And Elijah knew that his journey to reclaim his saxophone and justice, though still fraught with challenges, he would no longer have to walk alone. The music for Elijah, a Harmony of Hearts concert, may have ended, but its echoes lingered. In the crowd that night, many had used their cell phones to capture the memorable moments, especially Elijah's emotional speech. And, as is natural in the digital age, those videos quickly found their way onto social media. One particular video, a close-up of Elijah's face as he shared his story, his voice trembling but resolute, touched the hearts of thousands. It wasn't professionally shot. The audio had some background noise, but its raw authenticity made it all the more powerful. People shared it with captions expressing empathy, outrage, and admiration. The hashtags numbered "NOLA Stolen Sounds" and numbered "Justice for Elijah" once again trended on social media platforms in New Orleans and even began to spread to neighboring cities. Local television stations, which had initially only given scant coverage to Maya's article, could no longer ignore the video's viral appeal. They began to approach Maya for interviews, wanting to learn more about the story behind the street musician and the accused officer. Images of Elijah, his pain and resilience evident, started appearing on the evening news. Public pressure mounted, directed squarely at the New Orleans Police Department, NOPD. Phone calls and emails demanding an explanation, a transparent investigation, began to flood the chief of police's office. Social activists and local civil rights organizations also officially spoke out, demanding concrete action from NOPD regarding Officer Mark Callahan. Meanwhile, Officer Callahan, accustomed to his petty misdeeds going unnoticed, began to feel the heat. He hadn't expected an incident with a lowly street musician to cause such a storm. Initially, he had been dismissive, thinking it would all blow over soon. But when his name and the image from the security camera began appearing in the media, when colleagues started looking at him differently, Callahan began to worry. At NOPD headquarters, Police Chief Frank Donovan, a man nearing retirement with years of experience handling media crises, could not sit idly by. He was no stranger to allegations of police misconduct. But Elijah's case, with the viral video and widespread public support, had become a festering problem. It wasn't just damaging Callahan's reputation, it was eroding public trust in the entire police force. Chief Donovan convened an emergency meeting with senior officers and the legal department. "We have to do something about this," he said, his voice betraying his frustration. "I don't want this dragging on any longer. It's making us look bad." The legal department advised launching an official internal investigation into Officer Callahan, at least to appease public opinion. "We need to show the public we're taking this seriously," one of the department's lawyers said. "If we do nothing, the situation will only get worse." Some senior officers defended Callahan, suggesting he had only been a little heavy-handed, and that those street performers can be a nuisance sometimes. But the video evidence, however imperfect, combined with the growing media pressure, made it difficult for them to ignore. Finally, Chief Donovan made a decision. "All right," he declared. "Open an internal investigation into Officer Callahan. Assign it to Internal Affairs. I want a report as soon as possible. And during the investigation, Callahan will be temporarily assigned to desk duty. No street patrol." It was a calculated move. Desk duty wasn't a severe punishment, but it showed NOPD was taking action. A press release was issued shortly thereafter, emphasizing the department's commitment to transparency and accountability, and urging the public to be patient while awaiting the investigation's outcome. Maya Brooks and Mr. Sam Green received news of the investigation through a source within the department. "This is a small but important step," Mr. Sam told Maya. "At least they can't completely ignore us anymore, but don't get too optimistic. Police internal investigations are often just for show. We need to keep up the pressure." Elijah, upon hearing Callahan was under investigation, felt a slight sense of relief, but still harbored many doubts. He had witnessed too many times justice being delayed or denied for people like him. Would this time be different? Meanwhile, the wave of support for Elijah continued to spread. A local music store offered to repair his saxophone free of charge. Many musicians invited him to join small gigs once he had his instrument back. Encouraging messages and shares continued to pour onto the social media page Maya had helped him create. Elijah began to realize his story was no longer his alone. It had become a symbol for a larger struggle, a fight for justice, for the dignity of ordinary people often left behind. And whatever the outcome of the investigation, he knew he was no longer the lonely musician playing sad tunes in the heart of the city. He had an entire community standing behind him, ready to raise the chorus of truth with him. The New Orleans Police Department's NOPD internal investigation into Officer Mark Callahan proceeded just as Mr. Sam Green had predicted. Slowly and discreetly. The Internal Affairs Division, the unit responsible, was notoriously a black box. Very little information leaked out, and their processes often dragged on for weeks, even months. To the public, it appeared NOPD was taking action. But for Maya, Mr. Sam, and Elijah, it was a period of tense and uncertain waiting. Officer Callahan, despite being reassigned to desk duty, remained fairly composed. He trusted in the protection of the Brotherhood and the system. He had already been interviewed by internal investigators, recounting the incident in a way that favored him. Elijah was disturbing the peace, uncooperative, and the saxophone was damaged accidentally while he was trying to control the situation. He denied all allegations of using unnecessary force or making insulting remarks. Maya Brooks didn't sit idly by. She continued her work as a journalist, trying to unearth more information that could shed light on the case. She contacted people who had previously complained about Callahan, persuading them to file official complaints or at least provide anonymous testimony for the investigation. A few agreed, though still fearful. Every piece of information, however small, Maya relayed to Mr. Sam Green. Mr. Sam, with his years of experience navigating the bureaucracy, also worked relentlessly. He officially filed a complaint on Elijah's behalf, attaching the video footage, though not high quality, and a detailed account of the incident. He constantly called and wrote to the Internal Affairs Division, requesting updates on the investigation's progress, ensuring Elijah's case wouldn't be swept under the rug. He knew that close external scrutiny was crucial. They'll try to drag it out, hoping things will die down. Mr. Sam explained to Elijah and Maya during a meeting. They'll try to downplay the severity of it. Maybe just give Callahan a slap on the wrist and let it go. We have to show them we're not giving up. Elijah, during these waiting days, felt an internal conflict. Part of him wanted to believe in justice, to believe the truth would come out. But another, larger part was haunted by past experiences, by the times he'd seen the system turn its back on people like him. The music store had taken his saxophone for repair, promising to do their best, but that too would take time. Every day without his horn, Elijah felt like a part of him was missing. He spent more time at the library, reading about the history of jazz, about great musicians who had faced hardship and prejudice. He also started writing music again, not with his saxophone, but with scrawled notes on old pieces of paper. The new melodies had a different color, more somber, more reflective, but also held a hidden determination. One afternoon, as Elijah sat in a park, trying to find some peace, an elderly black woman approached him. "Are you Elijah Vance, the musician on television?" she asked, her voice kind. Elijah, surprised, nodded. "I saw your story," she said, taking his hand. "My son had trouble with the police too, just for walking home late. I know how you feel. Don't give up, young man. A lot of people are on your side." The unexpected encouragement from a stranger touched Elijah deeply. He realized his story had reached more people than he thought. It wasn't just about a saxophone. It was about the injustices many in his community had experienced. Several weeks passed. The internal investigation seemed to have no clear results. Public patience began to wane. Maya wrote a few more articles updating the situation, questioning NOPD's delay. Mr. Sam continued to send letters of inquiry. Then one day, Mr. Sam received a call from the Internal Affairs Division. They wanted to invite Elijah to give an official statement. This was an important step. "They want to see you, Elijah," Mr. Sam announced. "This is your chance to tell them your story directly. I'll go with you. Are you ready?" Elijah took a deep breath. He had been preparing for this moment. The fear was still there, but it no longer overshadowed his determination. He thought of his late father, of the people who had supported him, of the melodies he longed to play again. "I'm ready, Mr. Green," Elijah said, his voice firm. "I'll tell them the truth." The meeting was set for the following week, at NOPD headquarters, the very place where silent walls often concealed many truths. Elijah knew this would be a difficult confrontation. He would have to face people who might not want to hear his truth, people who might try to distort his story. But he also knew that this time, he was no longer alone. He had Maya, he had Mr. Sam, and he had an entire community watching, waiting for justice to be served. The melody of truth, however obstructed, had to be heard. The day Elijah went to NOPD headquarters to give his statement, the New Orleans sky was a dull, heavy gray, mirroring his own mood. Mr. Sam Green accompanied him, his expression serious but reassuring. Maya Brooks was also there, not as a reporter attending the deposition, but as a friend offering moral support, waiting outside the meeting room. The Internal Affairs office was deep within a long, oppressively silent corridor. The room Elijah was led into wasn't large, just a long table, a few chairs, and bland, cream-colored walls devoid of windows. Two investigators, a man and a woman, dressed in plain clothes, sat opposite him. They introduced themselves professionally but coolly. Mr. Sam sat beside Elijah, placing his leather briefcase on the table. "My client is prepared to cooperate fully with this investigation," he stated, his voice clear and firm. "We only ask for a fair and transparent process." The deposition began. The investigators asked questions sequentially, their tone neutral, trying not to betray any emotion. They asked Elijah to recount the incident in detail from beginning to end, what he was doing before Officer Callahan approached, how the conversation unfolded, Callahan's actions, and the condition of the saxophone afterward. Elijah, though very tense, tried to remain calm and recount the truth as clearly as possible. He remembered Mr. Sam's advice. "Just tell the truth, Elijah. Don't add anything. Don't..." exaggerate. The truth has its own weight. He described his fear as Callahan approached, his helplessness when being unfairly harassed, and the agonizing pain of seeing his saxophone destroyed. He tried to control his emotions, but his voice occasionally faltered when he spoke of his father's memento. The investigators listened, occasionally taking notes. One of them, the man, asked more probing questions, seemingly trying to find inconsistencies in Elijah's testimony or steer the narrative in a different direction. "Were you under the influence of alcohol or any other substances that evening, Mr. Vance?" the male investigator asked. "No, sir, I was not," Elijah replied definitively. "I never drink when I'm playing music." "Did you engage in any behavior that could be considered provocative towards Officer Callahan? Did you use any inappropriate language?" "Not at all," Elijah affirmed. "I was only trying to explain things to him. I didn't want any trouble." Mr. Sam occasionally intervened, asking the investigators to clarify questions or objecting to leading or imposing inquiries. The atmosphere in the room grew increasingly tense. The female investigator, who seemed less aggressive, asked, "Mr. Vance, Officer Callahan stated that your saxophone was damaged accidentally during a struggle with him. What do you say to that?" Elijah took a deep breath. This was the crux of the matter. "That's not true," he said, his voice resolute. "There was no struggle. He snatched the saxophone from my hands and threw it. I had no chance to react. Do you have any evidence to support your statement other than the video we've already reviewed?" The male investigator pressed, a hint of challenge in his voice. "That video, frankly, isn't entirely clear." "I have the truth," Elijah replied, looking directly into the investigator's eyes. "And I have my conscience. I know what happened that night." The deposition lasted nearly 3 hours. When it ended, Elijah felt exhausted, both physically and mentally, but he also felt a certain sense of relief. He had spoken his truth, had faced the representatives of the system. The rest, he could only hope for. When Elijah and Mr. Sam walked out of the room, Maya was waiting, her expression anxious. "How did it go?" she asked. Mr. Sam patted Elijah's shoulder gently. "He did very well, very brave." "They didn't seem to believe me much," Elijah said, his voice still laced with fatigue. "They tried every way to make it seem like it was my fault." "That's their job, Elijah." "Mr. Sam said, "They're paid to protect their own. But we've planted a seed of doubt in their minds, and we have public opinion on our side. Don't lose heart." On the way home, Elijah felt a strange sense of peace. He had done everything he could. He had told his story, faced his fears. Whatever the outcome of the investigation, he knew he had not remained silent. A few days later, an unexpected development occurred. Mrs. Dubois, the souvenir shop owner who had provided the initial video to Maya, after many sleepless nights and encouragement from her family, decided to contact Mr. Sam Green. She said she had another video, from a different camera angle in her shop, much clearer. She had been too afraid to release it before, fearing retaliation, but after seeing Elijah's courage and the community's support, she felt she had to do the right thing. The new video was truly irrefutable evidence. It clearly showed Officer Callahan's deliberate action of snatching and throwing Elijah's saxophone, with no struggle involved, contrary to his testimony. "This is it," Maya exclaimed as she watched the video with Mr. Sam. "This is exactly what we needed." Mr. Sam smiled. "Justice is sometimes delayed, Miss Brooks, but it will arrive if we are persistent enough." He immediately sent the new video to the Internal Affairs Division, along with a letter requesting them to re-examine the entire case. This time, the silent walls of NOPD seemed to begin to tremble. The pressure was mounting, and the truth, no matter how well concealed, was slowly finding its way to the light. The new security camera footage from Mrs. Dubois sent a small tremor through the NOPD's Internal Affairs Division. The clear images of Officer Mark Callahan's actions could no longer be interpreted as an accident or a struggle. It exposed a stark truth about an abuse of power. Investigators were forced to resummon Callahan. This time his confident demeanor had vanished. Faced with irrefutable evidence, Callahan became flustered, weakly trying to excuse himself by saying he had gotten a little carried away due to work pressure. But those words held no weight anymore. The internal investigation, which had risked being dragged out or ending with a lenient disciplinary action, now faced a different reality. Public pressure, media scrutiny, and now undeniable evidence left Police Chief Frank Donovan with few options. Continuing to protect Callahan would be a PR disaster, severely undermining NOPD's already fragile reputation. A few weeks after Elijah's deposition, the official findings of the internal investigation were announced. It wasn't a grand press conference, just a brief statement sent to the media and posted on the NOPD website. The statement confirmed that Officer Mark Callahan had violated department regulations regarding the use of force and professional conduct. The findings explicitly stated that Callahan's actions towards Mr. Elijah Vance were inappropriate and unnecessary. As for disciplinary action, Officer Callahan would be suspended without pay for 30 days, required to attend an intensive training course on anger management and community relations, and would be under close supervision for 1 year upon returning to duty. The statement also expressed regret over the incident and pledged NOPD's continued efforts to improve community relations. When Elijah, Maya, and Mr. Sam Green received this information, their reactions were complex. 30 days suspension without pay? Maya blurted out, her voice filled with disappointment. Is that all? After everything he did? She felt the punishment was far too light for the emotional and material damage Elijah had suffered. Mr. Sam Green, with his experience, had a more pragmatic view. Miss Brooks, in the real world, this is already a small victory, he said. It's rare for a police officer to face such public disciplinary action, even if it's just a temporary suspension. The fact that they admitted Callahan violated regulations is a step forward. It sets a precedent. Elijah listened silently. He didn't feel a sense of triumph, nor was he completely satisfied. 30 days. Suspension seemed like a slap on the wrist compared to what he had endured. His saxophone, though being repaired, would never be quite the same, but then he reconsidered. Callahan had been punished, even if not proportionally. More importantly, the truth had been acknowledged. His voice, a street musician's voice, had been heard, had made a difference, however small. At least, Elijah said softly, he won't be able to do this to someone else for a while. And maybe other officers will think twice before they act. Exactly, Elijah, Mr. Sam agreed. And don't forget, we still have the option of a civil lawsuit to claim damages for the saxophone and your emotional distress. This disciplinary decision by NOPD will be an advantage for us. The decision on whether to pursue a civil suit remained open. For Elijah, the most important thing at that moment was the acknowledgement that he had done nothing wrong, that he was the victim. News of the investigation's outcome spread quickly. The New Orleans community had mixed reactions. Many felt the punishment for Callahan was too lenient, a sign of NOPD's tolerance. They organized small protests outside police headquarters, demanding stricter penalties and more substantial reforms within the force. However, many others saw it as a positive sign, a testament to the fact that the community's voice could make a difference. They praised Elijah's courage, Maya's persistence, and Mr. Sam's dedication. Elijah's story became a widely discussed topic concerning police-community relations and the need for accountability. For Officer Mark Callahan, the 30-day unpaid suspension and the negative media attention were a severe blow to his career and ego. He became sullen and irritable. Some colleagues distanced themselves from him, while others offered lukewarm sympathy. He began to realize that an impulsive act on one evening could have serious and lasting consequences. Meanwhile, another piece of good news reached Elijah. The music store announced that his saxophone had been repaired. They had worked meticulously, trying to restore it as best as possible. Though it couldn't be exactly like new, it could once again produce melodies. The day Elijah went to pick up his saxophone, he felt like he was reuniting with an old friend after a long separation. He held it in his arms, his fingers lightly tracing the familiar keys. An indescribable, poignant emotion welled up inside him. "Give it a try, Elijah," the instrument repairman said, smiling. Elijah took a deep breath and put the mouthpiece to his lips. And then the first notes rang out. The sound was a little different than before, deeper, as if carrying the weight of his recent experiences, but it was still the sound of his saxophone, his melody. He played an impromptu blues piece, the notes sometimes mournful, sometimes soaring, as if recounting his entire story. The pain, the despair, then hope and resilience. Maya and Mr. Sam stood nearby, listening silently, a gentle smile on their lips. The gavel of justice may not always strike like thunder. Sometimes it's just a quiet sound, a slow change. But for Elijah, the notes now emanating from his revived saxophone were the clearest proof that, however small, justice could still be found, if one dared to speak the truth. The saxophone rested snugly in Elijah's arms, surprisingly familiar and warm. The scars on its body, though skillfully minimized by the talented repairman, remained, like reminders of a somber chapter in his life. But when he put the mouthpiece to his lips and let his breath mingle with the metal, the sound that emerged no longer carried the weight of despair. It was different, more mature, deeper, and imbued with a latent strength he hadn't recognized before. Elijah didn't rush back to his usual street corner. He needed time to reacquaint himself with his returned friend, to rediscover the harmony they once shared. He spent hours each day in his small trim apartment, playing old tunes, experimenting with new melodies forming in his mind. His music was no longer just notes. It was his story, a reflection of his ups and downs, his pain, and his hope. News of Elijah receiving his saxophone and the outcome of the NOPD investigation had spread through the community. Many expressed joy, seeing it as a victory for what was right. Fellow musicians constantly called, inviting him to jam sessions, eager to hear his horn again. The first evening Elijah decided to play in public again wasn't on his old corner, but at the Blue Moon, the small jazz bar that had hosted the benefit concert for him. Leo, the young drummer, had specifically invited him as an honored guest. When Elijah stepped onto the small stage, the entire room fell silent. Soft yellow light shone down, highlighting the saxophone gleaming in his hands. He said nothing, just nodded to the crowd and began to play. A slow, soulful blues melody filled the air, seeping into every corner of the bar. Elijah's saxophone seemed to be telling a story, sometimes a soft, choked sob like suppressed tears, other times soaring high and strong like an affirmation of existence. Everyone listened, enraptured, as if drawn into the current of emotion he created. No one spoke. No glasses clinked. Only music. When the piece ended, a hush fell for a moment, then applause erupted like thunder. This time, there was no pity, only admiration and respect. Elijah smiled, a genuine, warm smile. He truly felt like he had come home. After that night, Elijah began to play more regularly. He returned to his old street corner, but the atmosphere was different. Many residents of the neighborhood, who might have just walked past before, now stopped to listen longer, smiling and nodding at him. Occasionally, a few police officers on patrol would pass by. They'd glance at him, but without the previous arrogance or scrutiny. Perhaps his story had created a small shift in their perception, or at least they were aware that their actions were being watched. Officer Mark Callahan, after his 30-day suspension, had returned to work, but he was no longer patrolling the French Quarter. He had been transferred to a department with less public contact. Rumors in the precinct said he had become sullen, more irritable, and that his career was effectively over. For Elijah, that wasn't his concern. He wasn't seeking revenge. He just wanted to live and play his music in peace. Maya Brooks still visited Elijah frequently. Her article about the incident had won a small award from the local Journalists Association, and she was continuing to pursue other stories of injustice in the city. The friendship between her and Elijah grew stronger, They often sat for coffee, talking about music, life, hopes, and struggles. Mr. Sam Green, after careful consideration and discussion with Elijah, decided not to pursue a civil lawsuit for damages. Elijah felt that NOPD's admission of wrongdoing and Callahan's discipline were acknowledgement enough. He didn't want to prolong any legal troubles. He just wanted to focus on his music. Mr. Sam respected that decision. "The important thing is that you've found your voice and your peace again, Elijah," he said. One afternoon, as Elijah was playing on his street corner, a black boy of about 10, clutching an old clarinet, shyly approached him. "Mister," the boy whispered, can I play a tune with you?" Elijah looked at the boy, seeing an image of himself many years ago. He smiled. "Of course, young man. What do you want to play?" And then, the sound of Elijah's saxophone blended with the clear, sweet notes of the boy's clarinet, creating a new melody, an impromptu duet full of life. Passersby stopped, clapping along to the rhythm. The golden afternoon sun shone down, enveloping the two musicians, one old, one young, sharing their passion and hope. The melody that was once stolen was now not only reborn but was being passed on, spreading. Elijah understood that his music, his story, had become part of a larger symphony, a symphony of resilience, of humanity, and of faith in a better tomorrow. And he would continue to play, continue to breathe life into every note, so that those melodies would forever echo in the heart of New Orleans. Many months had passed since that fateful night. New Orleans remained the same, still noisy, bustling, still carrying within it an intense vitality, where jazz and blues melodies seeped into every street corner, every soul. But for Elijah Vance, and perhaps for a part of this city's community, something had changed. A subtle, yet profound shift. Elijah was no longer the anonymous street musician, quietly playing his sad tunes. He had become a small icon, a reminder of the power of resilience and the voice of truth. The street corner where he often played was now not just a musical performance spot, but also a meeting place, a space for sharing. Occasionally, other young musicians would seek him out, asking to play with him, learning from him not just technique but also spirit. His incident, though it didn't lead to immediate, large-scale systemic reforms within NOPD, had instilled in many a new awareness of the need for accountability. Dialogues between the community and the police in some areas became more open, though gaps and prejudices still needed time to be bridged. The unofficial code of silence regarding complaints about police misconduct seemed to have lessened its grip. Maya Brooks continued her journalistic career with an even more fervent passion. Elijah's story had taught her a valuable lesson about the power of community journalism, about the ability to create change from seemingly small stories. She still visited Elijah regularly, not just to listen to music, but to talk, to feel the positive energy he radiated. Mr. Sam Green, though in the twilight of his career, continued his quiet work, defending the vulnerable. Elijah's case was like a spiritual tonic, reminding him that the fight for justice, no matter how arduous, was never in vain. One beautiful Sunday afternoon, the city hosted a small street music festival. Elijah was invited as one of the main performers. He stood on a stage much larger than his familiar street corner, before hundreds of spectators. His saxophone, its scars now part of its story, gleamed under the sun. When he began to play, a respectful silence fell over the crowd. His melody now contained not only sadness or longing but also joy, freedom, and a fierce belief in life. It was a symphony of the emotional spectrum he had traversed, a tribute to those who had stood by him. In the crowd, Maya and Mr. Sam stood side by side, smiling. They saw a completely different Elijah from the desperate man they had once met. He had reclaimed not only his saxophone but also his dignity and his voice. When the final piece ended, the applause was thunderous and unending. Elijah bowed to the audience, a radiant smile on his face. He knew his journey wasn't over. There would be more challenges, more difficulties ahead, but he also knew he would never let anyone steal his melody again. The story of Elijah Vance, the street musician whose saxophone was stolen, was not just a tale of injustice and the struggle for redress. It was also a testament to the undying power of art, the ability of music to heal and connect people. It was an affirmation that even in the darkest moments, a person's dignity cannot be trampled if they dare to stand up and speak their truth. And perhaps, most importantly, it was a song of hope. Hope that community solidarity can move seemingly insurmountable walls. Hope that small acts of compassion and courage can ignite great fires, illuminating the path for change. As night fell on New Orleans, the sound of Elijah's saxophone still echoed somewhere in the streets. A melody not just to be heard, but to be felt. To remember that no matter how hard life tries to silence your notes, the symphony of humanity and the yearning for justice will always find a way to rise, strong and eternal. Listen closely, because those melodies might be playing right beside you, in your own community, waiting to be understood, to be shared, and to be sung together into a heroic anthem of change. Justice and change don't start with grand, distant things. They start with hearts that know how to feel, with hands ready to join together, and with voices daring to speak up for what is right, no matter how small.